Hello, everyone. This is Realtor Linda Peltz, and I'm here with Al Gonzalez today. He's a local lender and he specializes in veterans loans. He's going to tell you all about them. Take it away, Al.
Hi, Linda. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. The VA loan, like you said, I'm a lender in Fresno, VAloanveteran.com. I've been doing loans for about 22 years. And in that time, I've kind of niched myself out as a veteran lender. I am a veteran myself. So I think one of the biggest attributes to that complements my business is when I get a call from a realtor like you and you say, "Hey, Al, can you call this veteran for me?" Sure. And I get on the phone with them. It's easy for me to build automatic rapport. Some of these guys and girls have PTSD. So going through this big financial decision in their life, first time for a lot of them, there's a lot of anxiety involved. Like, Linda, you've been doing this for a while too.
Oh,
So
I tell you,
to,
all first-time homebuyers have
yep,
horrid anxiety, poor things. So I can only imagine a veteran and trying to maneuver the system as well as, doing the things that they've done in their life. So,
exactly. So that takes me to about 5 years ago when I niched myself out as a VA lender and I started working with brokers and agents in town and really trying to create the narrative that the VA loan is actually a really good loan because it is.
it
I
is.
think one of the biggest misnomers out there right now is um, the process with the inspection report, not the appraisal, but the property inspection. And a lot of sellers and even sellers agents still think that the seller has to pay for that, and they don't. The buyer, the borrower can pay for that. So think back to last year when things were crazy and a seller just ruled the world. There was no way a seller was going to pay $80 or $100 for an inspection. And it was easy for me to go in and say, hey, no, they don't have to. The buyer can pay for their own inspection. They can
Sure.
also pay for the repairs. So the seller doesn't even have to pay for the repairs in section 1 and 2. If the buyer really wants the house and they wanted to make those repairs, they can. And a lot of buyers were actually veterans were doing that last year. They had the money and they were paying for any inspection repairs that they need. Now, obviously, the market has shifted. We're in a different environment, and now sellers are really, giving incentives
They're
to go in
really
and buy the
giving their
house.
whole heart to getting that sold. Isn't
Yeah,
it amazing the difference
exactly.
in the markets? And I don't think
Yeah,
a lot of people realize the difference in the markets that we're in. And like you said, it was a seller's market here, what, less than 6 months ago. I mean, oh my gosh, we just couldn't get enough hold of enough properties in order to get all the people in there, and they had their choice of umpteen million different offers. Right now we're struggling. We're lucky if we can get one or two offers in on them. It's just the
yeah,
difference in the
yeah.
market. So
It's
definitely
it
shifting.
is. It is, and it's good to see that too, because to have that conversation with the veteran, they think automatically zero down. They think zero money. Well, it's zero down, but you have closing costs that are associated with the loan. And I
Right.
usually use a round figure of 3% of the loan amount. So if it's a $400,000 loan, 3% of 400,000 is $12,000, probably about what you're going to need for closing costs, and that includes your impound account, taxes, escrow, the whole thing, and the seller can pay for that. And check this out, Linda. So I had a veteran last month in December, and we had to pay a bunch of debt off because our ratios were just kind of out of whack. And the seller was giving us a generous, very generous seller credit north of about $15,000, and this was only a $310,000 home. And obviously, I couldn't use it all for the closing costs because the closing costs were only 8, 9 grand. Well, what I did was I was able to use some of that money to pay down the veteran's debt. So we paid off like
Nice.
3 credit cards. So the VA will let us do that. So they don't cap us like FHA and conventional do. Like we're capped on the maximum seller concession. The sellers can
Right.
contribute up to 6%, and I can get additional funds to pay off debt if the veteran really wants to buy that house. So I think one
If
scenario I
the
needed
if the seller agrees. Now that's a
if the
sticky
seller
point
agrees.
because
Right.
it can be available, but there again, you have to find an agreeing party that's willing to do this for you, because not all of them are, right? They're sometimes riding the wire too, as far as, they have the loan to pay off or whatever. So I just
Exactly.
want to point out that's a valuable importance, and that's why it's so important to get over to a seasoned loan officer that knows all the difference between the different types of loans, because number one, they're super different. And they all have different requirements that you're going to have to fulfill in order to get them in that loan type. But as well as then with you being VA specialized, a lot of these ins and outs that, can possibly be wrote into the contract. But there again,
Yeah.
just because the borrower says it does not make it so. And 0 down does not mean, you're not going to have to come up with some funds, whether you're a veteran
Right.
or not. I would love to
Yeah.
hand a house to everybody, not just the veterans, but in the same respect, the buyers do need to understand that there is still some cost associated with it, even though it's not a down payment for that loan. So
Yeah.
I don't think
And
they
it's
quite
it's good
always
to have
understand the difference.
it's good to have some skin in the game because if things do kind of go south or values go down, it gives them some incentive to want to continue to make payments or work with the servicer to stay in the house and not let
Yes.
it foreclose or anything get out of hand. So yeah, you definitely want to have them some skin in the game, and that helps out. So that's a great point that you were saying. So yeah, so we covered inspections, we covered the closing cost, and another thing I want to touch on was the appraisal. Again, another misnomer out there that everybody thinks the VA appraisal stays with the home if the borrower cancels, like FHA. No, you can actually
Mhm.
order a new appraisal for the new borrower. You don't have to
Nice.
transfer that old appraisal. So that's a really big incentive when I'm talking to an agent or even a seller. A couple of years ago, I was really talking to a lot of sellers because it was so competitive, and they're like, "Can you
Mm.
get on the phone with the seller and explain this to them?" I've been known to call the regional loan center in Arizona. I have a good relationship with the ops manager there, and getting the appraisals to the right person when we needed a reconsideration of value. And I'm batting about 98% on getting the value back that we needed because the appraiser missed something and something like that. So I go a little above and beyond than a lot of lenders do, but just because, again, like you mentioned, I know those kind of ins and outs. And
Mhm.
there's a few other lenders that do the same thing, and it's known, but a lot of people won't take that time, especially with the minimum property requirements. A lot of
Sure.
lenders don't realize the NPRs. If the NPRs are being met and the appraiser is calling something out that really doesn't affect the loan, you don't need to fix it. So a
Mhm.
lot of lenders don't know those NPRs and what they are, and if you don't, and there's something on the appraisal and you're dragging the seller and the seller's agent through the mud, they're like, oh my gosh, I got to, $2,000 to fix this. Well, hold on, let me check the NPRs, because if this isn't on the NPRs or it's meeting the minimum property requirements, we not even need to fix it. And you can take that to the regional loan center too, have them look at it and say, no, it's good to go. Go ahead and move forward with the transaction. So a lot of hoops that you can
Definitely.
jump through and help the buyer and the seller and the agents get through the transaction and close in less than 25 days. So really good stuff.
Nice. Nice. Now, one thing you might want to touch on too is just because they call you, it's not automatic they get a pre-approval just because they're a veteran. You might want to go over some of the qualifications a little bit so that they
Yeah,
realize, kind of like you talked about, they need a little skin in the game. So, it's just not an automatic thing just because you're a veteran. There are certain qualifications that go with getting approved for these loans.
really good point. So I'm just going to go through when I'm talking to a veteran. First thing I ask them, introduce myself, let them know I'm a veteran, and then I immediately ask, "Hey, honorable discharge or dishonorable?" And they're always like, "Oh, honorable discharge, awesome. Where were you
And that's
regularly?"
something to be so proud of. Yes.
It is, but I automatically know if they say dishonorable or something or medical or something, that certificate of eligibility that we need up front, I could have a hang up with that. And I immediately kind of go into, okay, why don't we do this? Send me your DD 214. Let me jump online and pull your certificate of eligibility if you don't have it. And let's go from there. Because without that, we don't even have a loan. And we're going to spend hours and days on a prequal. And if I didn't pull that COE up front, I don't even have a loan for the guy or girl. So I
Now,
immediately
I'm
ask them
just
that.
curious, just because I'm in the industry and I know, I think they have minimums on that DD 214 as far as whatever. I don't know. I don't know what it is. You can up to 400,000 of a house or something, or explain that to me just a minute.
Are you referring to
Well,
the?
maybe they already have another house and they want to buy another one.
Oh,
Can't
you're
they,
talking about.
isn't there a limit that they can put on their qualification through the Veterans Administration?
So on the certificate of eligibility, we receive what we call entitlement. And
Okay.
once that entitlement is exhausted, they don't lose their VA benefits to buy a home. What they lose is the zero down portion. So, like
Okay.
myself, for example, I'm a veteran. I purchased a home in Fresno. It's my primary residence, but hey, I want to move to the coast and I want to live in the coast now. And houses, I can say that's my primary residence. I'm going to live there because we do some business on the coast. But because I exhausted all of my entitlement for this home, when I go purchase my new home and I've looked into it, I'm going to need about 12% down for the new house.
I see. So there is
Yeah,
some sort of limits on how many
yeah.
times you can use it, or is it up to how much you can
There's no
own at one
there's no limits on how many times you can use a loan. It's how many entitlements you have, but the property always has to be owner occupied, the property that you're moving into. I can rent my house out. That's fine. It can stay a VA loan. I can rent it out, no problem. Even if I did it 6 months after the purchase. But once I move to a new home, that has to be my primary residence. VA won't do
time? Got it.
rental properties or second homes or anything.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. So yeah, I get that certificate of eligibility up front. I get their DD 14. If everything checks out, then we move immediately into the loan process. The really good thing with the VA and credit scores, they really don't have a minimum credit score requirement. I think last November I got somebody done with a 540 credit score. Now rates were
Oh,
a little
wow.
better then. Rates were a little better, so I was able to get them a decent rate. But in this environment with a 540, I'm probably going to do a little credit repair for that guy and get him over a 580 because that's the threshold that we want to be at and really get them a
Just to get
decent
them a
rate.
better interest rate,
Right,
right? I
right,
mean,
right.
okay,
Yeah.
nice.
So, so credit requirements, there's hardly any. As far as DTI, I mean, they can go a lot higher than 50% if they have compensating factors in their profile. Good
So
credit.
explain to them what DTI is. I mean, I
So
know, but
the debt to income ratio is your income measured against your debt. So if you
okay,
make $5,000 a month and your house payment's going to be $3,000 a month, you divide 3 by 50, that's about a 55% DTI, which is okay for VA. But one thing VA has is they have residual income. They want the veteran to have a certain percentage of income left over after their house payment and their revolving debt to still qualify for the loan. So if they don't meet their residual income, that will be a factor too that could negate the loan and they won't be able to get a loan.
okay, nice.
So yeah, so we get them approved, and yeah, so they meet all those requirements up front. I immediately move into sending them a link. They get approved. I gather their income documents. One thing with the income, if they've changed jobs, they recently got released from the military. They're a job hopper. All of those things with VA, you can kind of muddle through them as long as you have good explanations why they job hopped or why they had a gap in employment for 6 months or 8 months or a year. The VA is very flexible when it comes to that. And you just write a letter of explanation, let the VA know what's going on, and you can probably use the updated income. So they're pretty
And
flexible on
everyone's different. So until you
that.
ask the
Exactly.
question and they tell you what's going on in their life, you don't know, right?
You
So
don't.
be
You
honest,
really don't.
people. Be honest with
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. You have,
Give him
please
all
be
the correct
honest.
information and hit it up
Yeah,
front. A lot
exactly.
of paperwork and time goes into it on your part.
It does. It does. Good point. And spouses don't have to be on the loan, but if they are married, we do have to run their credit and count any debt against that debt to income ratio that we talked about earlier. If they're on the loan and they have income, great. But if they're married, they have to be somewhere considered in the transaction. It's
Okay.
just a VA rule. So always got to consider the spouses. Surviving spouses, husband or wife was in the military, they pass away, they leave the benefits to the surviving spouse. Same scenario. We can give the surviving spouse a VA loan. So there's some surviving spouses out there too. Works out good for them.
Now I'm curious and say for instance, a divorced gal comes to you, I don't know, and she was divorced from the veteran, but he's went on and maybe passed away or something. Is that something they can still use his VA, or is that something that kind of nixes it right there because they divorced him?
Yeah. If the divorce is final, then they're pretty much done. Yeah. If
Okay.
they're not divorced, some people just file the separation and there's not an official divorce, and that person can
Then
still
you can
go
use
through the proper. Yeah, you got to go through the proper loopholes with the VA to get the surviving spouse benefits. and they'll hand
Nice.
them over to
Okay.
you. But there is a process with the VA to do that.
So there is a fine line there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Nice. Anything else you can think of you'd like to share?
So we covered income, we covered the pre-qual, DD 214, certificate of loan limits. So in Fresno County or even California, I think the biggest loan that was done in California was north of about 2.8 million on a VA loan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Pretty high limit there.
So there's no limits on VA loans. It's whatever the veteran qualifies for. In Fresno County, though, most lenders have a cap of about 1.5 to 1.8 million. So there's no limit on what a veteran can qualify for. So if they can qualify for $1 million house, it's just going to be high limit VA loan, and we can put them into that house with that loan amount zero down.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
good to
loan
know.
amounts,
I
yeah,
was,
there's no
yeah.
loan amounts.
Some of the others have limits. Some of the other types of
Some
loans.
do. Some do. Oh yeah, like FHA is capped at I think 470 now or something like that. They changed that recently, conventional.
Yeah, I heard a
Um,
recent change it went through.
yeah. So I think we covered inspections, appraisal, qualifications, credit. Those are kind of the fine points that I touch on when I'm talking to an agent like yourself or a veteran, and really try to let them know in depth what to expect, just set the expectations. But I think the really cool thing with the VA loan is you can close it in less than 25 days,
That is
if you really
cool.
need to.
Yeah.
So you can really get that veteran in there, get them into a house, and if they're transitioning from a job, if they are in an apartment right now and they have to put a 30-day notice, really get them into and people think, oh, it's going to take 40 from now. Does it? If there's property issues, something outside of our control, yeah, it could take 30 to 45 days. But if it's a straightforward process, 25%.
One thing I think you probably do that helps is right when you're given the pre-approval, they're getting all that information into you. You don't hand out those pre-approvals lightly. So you make sure all the kind of that paperwork's in, and you kind of start the process with, I assume they're underwriters in with the VA too, right? So these
Yeah,
loans
yeah,
require a back office, which is they typically would say underwriters, to go through that file and make sure everything's in place. So that's kind of done ahead of time, and that's why you can usually do the 25-day close. Is when you vetted a potential buyer, you don't hand out these pre-approvals lightly. You kind of pretty well make sure that it's going to go. It's a go. So that's how you
absolutely.
get them through that 25-day period now, right? You do a lot of the vetting, and that skin in the game that you talked about kind of goes in from the buyer ahead of time to you, right? So
Yeah, we
let you know
do it
all the
all up
paperwork.
front. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
that's
that's
the
kind of nice.
beauty of that's the nice thing about working with a local lender. I know our friends at a local big company and that's used a lot, starts with a V and ends with United. Those gentlemen and gals, they don't do a lot of that vetting, and I've received a lot of those borrowers on my end, and I've asked these questions, these hard questions, and they're like, well, they didn't tell me that. I'm like, I know they didn't, but this is what you're going to run into if you get into escrow. This is going to be a problem with a lot of lenders out there. They're not doing all those asking up these questions up front. You got a guy, a gal sitting in a call center in the East Coast, and they're just trying to get you in the door and then sending you off with a prequal and get with a local lender. And I always tell people use local lenders. Just have us. We can even take a second look if they want to use that company. By all means, do it. But I do have a lot of agents that come to me and say, "Hey, can you talk to them and just make sure we're good? I know they're going to use this lender, but yeah." And
Oh yeah.
probably 80% of the time, I'm able to kind of sway them my way because I'm local. We can sit down and talk and so on and so forth. But
It
it
is so
helps.
important. And I
Yeah,
know I go through it constantly with my buyers. I can't write a decent offer until I know all the particulars and the facts of what's going on. So there again, they use that particular company we're not necessarily mentioning. It is hard because I can't get a hold of anybody to find out where we're at in the process a lot of
yeah,
times. And I do have to vet the client in order and get them over to a local to kind of explain it to them, because they didn't really get the full explanation. And as they're talking, I'm listening going, well, that's not really right, but I'm not a lender. Let's get you over to a lender that can kind of explain that to you. So we still end up a lot of times over at the local lenders, which is
yep,
the way it should be. So they have full understanding. I mean, I am only looking to help you. I am not looking
Yeah,
to hurt you in any way. I want you to understand it. I really do,
right.
before we put you in a home that you're not ready for. So, no,
Yeah,
that is a valid and very important point that you need to understand it. And there's a lot more to it than, just handing out. And there's a big difference too. One thing you might mention is there's a big difference between a pre-qual and a pre-approval.
yep,
So
there is,
totally
there
different.
is.
Pre-qual says, oh yeah, maybe. Yeah, sure. If everything you tell me is true, yeah, great.
Right.
Pre-approval is, hey, we've looked at the paperwork, you're vetted. It's
Yep.
pretty much a go here. We just have
We
to
have
get
no
it through
issue.
the back office and underwriters and deal with any other questions they might have. So big difference.
Exactly. One last thing I want to leave you and any veterans out there listening or families of veterans. Make sure I'm a veteran, and I was so because I was regular Army and Reserve and National Guard, and I didn't think I would qualify for a VA loan because I had spent my time like that. And it wasn't until probably 10 years later I decided, well, let me look into this. And I just sent my information into the VA through the portal, and about 2 days later, I had got my certificate. I'm like, oh, so a lot of veterans think they don't qualify. So just talk to a lender, talk to an agent, get them the DD 214 or the NGB paperwork from the National Guard or reserves, and let us look into it for you and see if you can use your veterans benefits. Don't think you don't qualify just because maybe something happened while you were in the military. We have ways to figure that out for you.
And a lot of times I think too is their lack of understanding of how
Hmm.
maybe there's the military system works. You can kind of help them with that and help them
Oh
kind of
yeah,
run the gamut and help them get their DD 214 and different things that goes with, your particular type of loan and whatnot a little bit. So I don't think they quite
absolutely.
understand that either. So
Yeah,
there is help out there, people. You just got to take the initiative and give us a call, give Al a call
yeah.
and let him
Just
help
gotta
you through
ask.
the system here. So
Awesome.
if you want to leave your contact information or whatever, so they can get a hold of you, I'll also include it in the articles and down below here. So feel free to leave that. And then I do have your information, so I'll go ahead and include it.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity, Linda. It's Al Gonzalez. I'm a local lender here, Fresno, California. VALoanveteran.com is my website. It's very user friendly. You can apply on there. My reviews are on there. Things about the VA loan are on there. So if you have any questions, just reach out. And I appreciate the opportunity and good speaking to you this afternoon.
Well, I so appreciate you jumping on here and joining us. So we'll get this information out and I will send over the copies of the articles to you. So
Wonderful.
enjoy the rest of your day. I hope
You
the
too.
rain kind of dies down a little bit so I can finish up some of my projects that I got.
All right. You stay
I,
safe out
I'm
there.
guessing it doesn't affect you quite as much as me, other than when you're trying to close something. So,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Appreciate it.
all
Thanks again,
right,
Linda. Alrighty.
all right. Talk to you later.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Bye bye.